Hey guys. So I just felt like making a video for today, just because like I had this random thought that pertains to, what did you know it, cryptocurrency. Um, I don't know. I just felt like I needed to express in some way because otherwise it'd linger in my consciousness and it'll be there forever. And it just I had to get this idea out. But like for the sake of this video, don't take whatever I say as financial advice. Really, it's just my opinion. And, this is kind of like my 2 cents in this huge bucket of ideas that's circulating in the world. So, that being said, this is my idea in terms of, or rather, my opinion surrounding crypto itself. And really, right now it's not doing so well, and a lot of people want to put the blame on Elon Musk, I guess. And I'm not entirely sure that that's fair. It could be that some people are just looking for a scapegoat. Um, but the point is, it's taking a dive, or it's taking a huge hit right now, and it's I'm sure it's an amalgamation of so many factors. But that being said, my opinion with regards to crypto, it as a replacement for today's currency, isn't one that necessarily agrees with that idea. And how I got to that point of me thinking or rationalizing in that way is by understanding how our current currency system actually works and its origins. So that being said, allow me to just kind of contextualize this through the lenses of how we got to our current currency system. So bear with me. I'll try and condense it in such a way where it's easily digestible. Um, but yeah, we're just gonna plow through this thing. So really, as long as there has been human need, there's been the need to trade. We evolved from simply hunting and gathering to, from simply surviving to farming, and farming in itself birthed different industries. People started specializing. Some specialize in steelworks, some maybe in uh, livestock, maybe some in bread, and some in producing grain and vegetables. So some people were just better at other people at doing certain things. So then people started specializing, but then people needed to trade with each other because everybody needed certain goods. The farmers needed plows, so they would trade with the people with the steelworks. People needed to eat, so then they would trade with like the bakers and the butchers and all of that. And the bakers and the butchers obviously needed the farmers. So people needed to trade. Now, the earliest form of trade was really bartering, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, especially during the onset of the pandemic and of lockdown in 2020. This kind of became a thing to do online. People weren't earning any money, but they did have their possessions. So, in order to cater to their needs, they would barter with people online. Now, I'm sure if you've experienced that, you can attest that it's hard to value your goods compared to other people's goods. Like, is what they're giving me an actual fair amount in terms of what I'm giving them? I'm sure you've had this question lingering, and this was a prevalent issue that existed during this time in history when people would trade using bartering. So eventually, people got around to gold. Now, gold has existed throughout, well, basically throughout the whole time the world has existed. But what I mean to say is, it's existed. It was an integral part for as long as civilization can remember. A lot of ancient civilizations really treasured gold for some reason. You know, Probably even far more than other precious metals like silver or bronze or whatever. But gold has been around in civilizations for a very long time, and eventually people kind of realized, well, what if we peg all of our currencies to gold. And this even birthed paper money. Now, the history of this is that people would keep gold in safe places like banks, and then the banks would issue receipts authenticating the amount of gold people had in store. So, those receipts, people would carry around receipts showing people, like, well, they wouldn't just like pop up to your face, like, this is the amount of gold I have, but like when they need to buy something, they would show the receipts of how much gold they had and then buy accordingly. You know, so if they had like 10 gold, they would buy items equivalent to 10 gold or fewer. So it birthed paper money, and you know, people just generally agreed that gold would be certain values. Now, there are a few limitations that gold has. And given that that's the case, we're only going to focus on one particular thing, especially as we're going to relate this to cryptocurrency, and it's that gold couldn't account well enough for economic progress. So, what do I mean by this? If you're a businessman and you're doing really well in terms of your market, in terms of what you're doing in your business, um, one of the first few things you're going to think about is expanding, right? Let's say, for example, you know, you're trading in shirts, or like you're selling shirts basically, and your shirts are selling really well. Like you got the hype beast market, you know, they're just dying for your shirts. So they're selling out like hotcakes, and so you're thinking, I need to get more materials. I need to get more supplies. I might even need to buy a truck. I need to hire more people. I need to invest in a warehouse. So you're thinking about expanding your business, but this is going to be difficult, especially if you only have a certain amount of gold available, or if there's only a certain amount of gold available in the market, because gold, for one thing, is very hard to find. You know, assuming you can find it, you're going to have to mine it, and then you're going to have to refine it. Refining itself is laborious. You know, you're going to put in like, you're going to use other materials, mercury, fire, all these different things to just refine gold. And gold has to be transported to the safe locations. And that in itself is risky to do. You know, when there's something precious, I'm sure that there's going to be a group that wants to take whatever is precious illicitly. So it's going to be hazardous to transport. So I'm assuming there's going to be some hazard pay on top of basic pay for the people who are actually going to transport it, who are going to secure it. And that being said, I'm sure there's going to be insurance premiums, you know, to safeguard the people who have an vested interest or an insurable interest in the gold itself. So it's going to play a factor in terms of how gold is going to be priced, but more importantly, it's going to take some time for gold to reach a certain point and then for you to print receipts. So that being said, there's only going to be so much receipts available on the market. So you can't just buy willy-nilly using receipts based on something that doesn't exist, because that's going to be inflationary, and it's going to mess up the market, right? Besides that, you know, it's going to mess you up, at least for your financial standpoint. You know, you might go into debt, but you know, it's very intricate and very complicated when you peg all of that to gold, because it's so limited. So you can't expand as fast as you would want. So eventually people realize this, countries realize this, that gold is very limited, but they want to expand their economies and they want to help their own nations. But gold, like I said, and I've said multiple times, is very limited. So eventually people, at least the nations, realize we have to find a different currency system. Following the Second World War, or at least towards the end of it, in 1944, 44 member nations, coincidentally, or representatives of 44 different nations met at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. I'm forgetting the name of the hotel, but you know, it was Bretton Woods was basically the place that they met, and they said, and they went there to agree on a centralized financial system. Now, conveniently, the United States had the world's majority of gold supply. They had roughly, or at least it's estimated that they had 75% of the world's gold supply during that time, whether you believe it or not. So countries then eventually agreed, okay, let's just peg our currencies to the US dollar and then buy gold from the American government. So this was the, I don't know, just like examples like the British pound, the English yen, maybe even the Philippine peso. They started pegging all their currency on the US dollar based on the gold, amount of gold that the US government had. But like I said, gold is very limited, and therefore economic progress would be very limited as well. So eventually people said, why don't we just forget gold altogether and just focus on the US dollar? What's it going to be pegged on? It's going to be pegged on, or it's going to be valued based on how well the US government performs. And this model is known as the fiat currency system. Now, if you're thinking of an Italian car, that's not what that is. Fiat is Latin for it shall be, I believe. So yeah, it shall be or let it be done, something like that. And it's 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 named that way because really the value for how the U.S. dollar, the origin rather for how the U.S. dollar is valued is so completely arbitrary, subjective, ambiguous. It's kind of like made up, and the value comes from how much faith people have in the US dollar. You heard that right. Faith. Trust. So if people don't think the US dollar or the US government is doing so well, that's going to have a very huge impact on the US dollar. At least the people, you know, basically running things. So, going back to fiat currency, really it's just about, oh, I think that this piece of paper is valued at $1. The government at least says that. You know, the government says it's $1, so it's $1. Period. It's crazy, I know. And yet the world runs on this insanity of perception, what is essentially perception. So, but it's easier for people to grow their economies based on this way because since it's not pegged to anything tangible, they can just grow and then they can just make some arbitrary numbers up. Obviously, like this is why we have central banks. The central banks have to see how much money there is in the market so that there's no hyperinflation, we don't experience deflation, and they can print as much money as needed, or they can stop printing money, they can slow down printing money, just so that the world doesn't experience some ubiquitous form of hyperinflation or something like that. Obviously, we have had record numbers of inflation throughout the years, but generally speaking, if nations wanted to succeed, or nations wanted to recoup their losses or go out of debt, the fiat currency system was far more effective, or at least perceived to be far more effective than the gold standard, or rather the currency system that used to be valued based on the amount of gold. So I know it's like what, 13 minutes already just talking about this, but the reason I bring that up is Bitcoin, or at least, well, cryptocurrency, but Bitcoin in particular is at least, has been marketed in the sense where it's super safe, right? It's super safe, and I don't doubt it. They got blockchain technology, and I can't fully explain it myself, although I do have some semblance of understanding. And I understand like the digital wallet type technology that they have, but they've come out and said that there's only ever going to be 21 million, 21 million, I believe, 21 million Bitcoins ever. It's safe. Now, initially, I didn't go into Bitcoin because, for one thing, actually, this is a funny story. Somebody came to me, I think around 2015 or 16, or whenever Bitcoin came about. They came to me and they said, dude, have you heard of Bitcoin? And no, and I did. That's I told him, at least, like I have no idea what that is, and he just didn't do a good job of explaining it, and the way that was presented, obviously I already had my hesitation, coming from so many meetings with people trying to entice me to pyramid schemes and Ponzi schemes. So right off the bat, I was already very skeptical. So I didn't invest in Bitcoin, even though like was selling for peanuts at that time. And now we know what Bitcoin is. Where was I going with this? Uh, but anyway, so like Bitcoin came about, and they said there's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoins, right? And so that to me makes it safe. Right. So the point that I'm trying to make is like, apparently it's safe because like before I knew that there was going to be like blockchaining and this cap, I thought like this was going to go on forever, and like there was going to be an infinite amount of bitcoins. So I figured, isn't that subject to inflation or like hyperinflation? So, you know, even when I started learning about it, like that was kind of my thought, and then I learned about the blockchain technology and like the max cap. But in relation to that, um, going back to my example with gold, imagine if technology had evolved in such a way where every piece of gold in the world was found. Wouldn't the receipts that come after it be worthless or like inflationary if they had some value? Like all the gold is found if we were still using the old currency system. But you can't just print receipts because all the gold is already found. Like you can't just print more receipts. It's done. It's finished. You know what I mean? So like I feel like that's the same issue with Bitcoin. Obviously, like there might be some people out there, or at least in terms of crypto, that might know a little bit more than I do. But if that's the only condition that they're saying that makes Bitcoin safer, then I don't think that going forward it can accommodate economic progress very well, right? So, that being said, I don't think it's going to replace, assuming that these are the only things that I need to know about it, right? That being said, I don't think it's going to do a very good job replacing currency because it's not going to do a very good job replacing currency in the same vein as gold wasn't a very good measure for, or wasn't a very good way for valuing currency because it couldn't keep up with economic progress. Because if there's only going to be 21 million bitcoins, you know, people. Sorry. Sorry about that. My phone went low bat for some reason. But that being said, it's not going to keep up with economic progress, or rather, it won't accommodate economic progress very well, right? It's all I'm thinking about. Now, again, and I reiterate, you shouldn't be taking my opinion as advice, as financial advice. All I'm saying is, like, you know, this is my opinion surrounding it. But should you still be investing in it? At least in my case, sure. But not as a currency, as a commodity. A lot of people like on YouTube that I've watched videos on with regards to Bitcoin, they've said like, no, you should still invest it in it as a currency because like, you know, we can still buy things with Bitcoin, right? Yeah, you can still buy things with gold if you have gold, right? And obviously they have other points, but this is the only one that I want to tackle specifically. You can still buy things with gold, right? But gold is a commodity. And it's not really a currency. It still has some value. You can still trade with it, but it just doesn't function very effectively as a currency because people need to grow, people need to expand, people need to reinvest. That's all I'm saying. That being said, should you still invest in it? Or at least in my case, if I can invest in it, I still would. Why? Because people will inexplicably value things, put value on certain things. How did we get fiat currency in the first place? Because people looked at this piece of paper and then everybody agreed this has some value. This is why Bitcoin was even made a thing. This digital thing that we can't hold in our hands has some value because people generally agreed that it had value. Anything can be commodified, right? This is why we have NFTs, non fungible tokens, which is a growing thing apparently. Who knew that a GIF or a GIF, depending on how you pronounce it, could have some value as a collector's item just because people said it had some value? Talk about Jordans. These things are really valuable. Talk about Yeezys. Talk about watches. People thought that these things have values, and so they do. Should you? In my case, would I invest in Bitcoin? If I had the money and the opportunity, I might still will, because people still believe it has value. Perception is the reason why. Okay, so this was mentally draining. I just like came out from walking around the city, and right to this because while I was walking, I had this epiphany. I wouldn't call it an epiphany if I'm outrightly wrong. You shouldn't call it that either. But I just felt like expressing my opinion, and I guess we can do that here on YouTube. But anyway, mine shouldn't be the standard of what's right or what's wrong. I just felt like I had to relate it somehow to something that I could comprehend, and I felt like I could comprehend our currency system, So, yeah, but I would love to know your thoughts. I'm pulling a Philip DeFranco, and I want to know your thoughts in the comments section below. I just want to know because it's such an interesting thing. I love how people just come together and say this thing has value and we can share ideas around this. Yeah, just the whole general community. I'm not pandering. All I'm saying is I like the sharing of ideas. Okay, I was pandering a little bit. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. Or not of this video about Bitcoin or crypto in general. Yeah, sorry, it's 20 minutes now. I guess I'm gonna end it there. And if in case I have a random video somewhere down the road, a random idea that I'm gonna make a video around, feel free to subscribe and maybe hit the notification bell. Oh, this weirdo has another idea on the internet that he put on YouTube, and I'm gonna watch it. See how stupid he is. I didn't mean to offend any redneck. Bye, guys.